Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Bear Guys and 2T Fitness.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Rambo edition, Rambo Iii. My name is Michael Schatz. I'm of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, is Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. What do you got for me, Tom?
Hell of a time for humor, John. Even the characters in this movie can't believe the amount of comic banter and one-liners.
I'm telling you, this movie is a full-blown fucking comedy.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it's an extension of a Bing Crosby, Bob Hope road movie.
Yeah, I likened it to...
That's what they seem to be going for.
Yeah, I likened it to Butch, but towards the end of the movie, it's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's a little bit of Lethal Weapon in there. Mm-hmm. It's a buddy comedy. It's
a buddy cop. Or not cop, but it's a buddy romp.
A double act buddy comedy.
Yeah.
By the end of the movie. Doesn't start out that way, but it gets there.
Right.
And a piece of state propaganda. And an impassioned defense of the Mujahideen.
Right.
If you can imagine all those things in one movie.
Oh my God.
Rambo Iii.
Rambo Iii is just a... So, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the 1988 sequel, Rambo Iii. We have forgotten altogether about First Blood. We're just on the Rambos now. This movie's directed, Tom, by Peter McDonald. Mm-hmm. The only other movies he's directed are The Never Ending Story 2, which I suppose we'll have to tackle at some point. I'm sorry. The Never Ending Story 3. I'm not sure I knew that there was a third one. And then he directed...
It's never ending, Michael. It's in the title.
He directed Mo Money.
Uh-huh.
And that's about it. He has been an assistant director on just all kinds of shit. Dragon Slayer, Cry Freedom, the first Batman, like Tim Burton's Batman, Harry Potter 2, 3, and 4, The Bourne Ultimatum, Guardians of the Galaxy.
If you'd have said the Adam West Batman, I still would have believed you.
Absolutely. Based on what we're seeing in this movie.
I think, first of all, that's a very respectable resume.
Yeah.
Secondly, I love how this movie's directed. One of my first notes is like, I love the way that exposition is done entirely through images. Mm-hmm. That's really smart filmmaking.
Smart.
Not a word is said and we know exactly what's happening. We're in Thailand. They're searching for Rambo.
Yep.
And Rambo is now a kickboxer.
Stick fighter.
A what?
Stick fighter.
There's a little bit of kickboxing in there too.
Well, I think you're going to have to say it's more stick fighting than anything else.
Okay. Rambo is now Conan the Barbarian. Which is what it looks like.
This movie, not as successful. Big money overseas. It had a budget of $63 million, so we increased the budget yet again. Only $13 million on its opening weekend. 53.7 total in the USA, so it did not make its money back.
Ooh.
But worldwide, $189 million.
How did it do it? How did it do in Afghanistan?
Right? I'd like those numbers, please.
And how badly did it do in Russia?
At the time, Tom, this was the most expensive movie ever made at $63 million. 1988.
I was going to say it's all on screen, and it is, but in a very specific way.
Go on.
Well, no, I just mean that... I just mean it's in the excess of action, but as you've alluded to, it's excessive even for late 80s action cinema.
Well, and so
so it doesn't need to be the most expensive movie ever made.
And here's the thing. I mean, I've alluded to this in our previous episodes, especially our introductory episode. I remember hating this movie when I first saw it in theaters in 1988. I'm sure I have seen it. This is probably the movie I'd seen the least, certainly of the first three movies.
Mm-hmm.
This was not a repeat viewer for me like Rambo First Blood Part 2 was when I was a kid. So I probably saw it when it came out on videotape, like on VHS again, and then thought, no, I was right, that movie sucked. But I got to tell you, I'm 3/4 of the way through this movie, and I was like, what's my problem? This movie's fucking awesome.
That would have been my question to you also.
And then I do think that the movie devolves into basically a Batman episode, like an Adam West Batman episode.
Ridiculous.
But it's so ridiculous that it's successful on that level. And so I'm sorry, but this is my second favorite of the sequels, and I declare it a good movie. As have you. We're the same
in both cases, yeah. I mean, I think... I don't think I was on mic when I said this, but my problems with it came from this viewing. I actually thought this was the best sequel. Where,
of course you thought the third movie.
Yeah.
Going in, you thought the third movie was the best.
Because I'm conditioned to think that way. And, I gave my reasons before. It's figured out its formula and it's having fun with it, and those are my favorite kinds of sequels. But... I some of that gloss kind of stripped away watching it only 18 months after the last time I saw it, and I mean it's like you can't get around the fact that history has not served this movie well.
No, yeah.
You alluded to the fact when we in the last episode.
Should I just give you like a blanket 3 to 5 minutes to talk about this and The Living Daylights, or do you want to stay on Rambo 3?
I'm not going to dignify that with an answer, but yes. I mean, this is a very specific moment of history where Hollywood has decided that the Afghanistan...
all its major characters should be working with Osama bin Laden.
Right. The Mujahideen are in a very...
guys.
Yeah, they're the heroes, between 85 and 88?
I think so. That's, yeah.
Living Daylights is 87.
87 is Living Daylights.
And it's just... You can't really describe, even through like a discussion-based podcast, how much glorification of the Mujahideen, the Afghanistani resistance against Russian invasion, is in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a dedication to them at the end of the movie.
Yes.
In words.
I did not remember that.
No.
I did not remember that those
As soon as that came up, I said, wow, they've really screwed themselves. They have no deniability now.
No.
Rambo 3 caused 9/11, everyone.
But, and that's the thing, is because this movie, the original ending was supposed to be him staying with them.
Right.
That was going to be the original ending. Cut to John J. Rambo flying a plane into the Pentagon.
I feel that sentence got away from the truth at one point.
At the very least. But let me ask you this.
Now, you mentioned it. I wasn't going to bring it up. But you mentioned The Living Daylights, so I guess we have to talk about it.
My fault. Sorry, everyone.
But I've seen that movie a lot. I do remember there is a moment very, very similar to... This is a Bond... By the way, for those who don't know, this is a Bond movie where the Mujahideen are Bond's main allies in the movie, and where he's temporarily working with them in their terrorist operations. But there is a similar scene where they ask him to stay and join the war effort.
Yeah.
So, just to give you some kind of context that there was, the action cinema of that time was identifying this kind of maverick lone hero with what the Afghani people were doing. So that's kind of interesting. But go ahead. What was your question?
Well, I was just controversial as though it may be. Because if you've also seen Charlie Wilson's War, which will give you the context of what was going on in reality, where we were supplying
the
Mujahideen through our government, but then we fucked up the end game. So is it possible in the context of when these movies were made in the 80s that their cause was righteous and they radicalized because we fucked up the end game?
That's not controversial.
I mean, is that...
I don't think that's controversial. I think that's an accepted truth now.
Okay.
Among people who can, understand facts and things.
Right.
Which is about, 40% of the country?
At least.
I think I absolutely.
So it's only in, hindsight that we say these two movies don't age well.
Yeah,
they could have aged just fine if our government could have got its shit together, right? Possibly.
True, but I mean,
there's
certainly
no way to know,
this movie, and I'm pretty sure The Living Daylights is getting some of its money this way too. This was the filmmaking arm of supplying. It was supplying cultural goods to Afghanistan by glorifying their actions on an international stage. So this was the kind of propaganda equivalent of selling, supplying arms and training to them, was making them the heroes of American cinema. Right. So this is all part of the same problem. Because if you look at the credits of this movie, half the American government are credited.
Yeah.
In the credits of Rambo Iii, which says to me that this is purely state propaganda, and also explains why we're suddenly taking it easy on the government bureaucrats who were the villains of the last movie. And and First Blood.
Yeah.
Everyone in a position of legal or government authority up until this point in the franchise
has been a villain.
And now they're represented by lovable Kirkwood Smith.
Right.
Who is straight up with Rambo from the start.
Yeah.
Makes a special trip to go and tell him that Troutman's been kidnapped.
Was a fuck up. Right.
And he's, like the worst they're willing to go is say, oh, he's a little bit ornery, but, he's got a hard job. Flash forward to the credits. Office of the Senate of Congressman, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, now it all makes sense.
Right.
But aside from that, I mean, I don't actually think it's laughable because they're so off the mark as to how history has progressed.
Yeah.
And they screwed themselves so royally because it's not even subtext, it's just text.
Actual text.
Yeah. Actual verbal text. But I don't think it's a problem for the movie. It's also not a problem in The Living Daylights, which is certainly, I would say, the best Bond film of the 80s, probably one of the best Bond films of all time. So it doesn't compromise them.
Movie.
It doesn't compromise Rambo 3 as an enjoyable piece of action entertainment, which it sets out its stall very early on that's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And So I don't think it's a huge problem. Where it starts to get difficult is when there's no reflection. Well, there's no room for it structurally in this movie at all. But there's no reflection on, because essentially the Mujahideen are doing what the Viet Cong did to the Americans. In terms, their resistance is of a very similar nature, grassroots.
Well, it's blatantly stated by Troutman.
Yeah, exactly. But
he's got a hell of a speech.
But at no point does that lead to a reflection where we're like, oh, well, maybe, we should reconsider how we think of the Viet Cong and the Vietnamese people in general, which is the next stage of that thinking that the movie just can't get to. And that kind of hypocrisy it's hard to take.
Right.
Politically. But, this idea of like it makes sense historically, but it makes sense in terms of movie making that you would go to Afghanistan. It's certainly the war of the moment, the war of the week, as we talked about on the minisode. Guest war.
Right.
Afghanistan.
Starring Guest War Afghanistan.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with it at that level, but it raises a number of questions that are not just about hindsight, that are about not being able to reconcile your own role in world politics through this example.
Yeah.
Because somehow, like you say, Troutman makes the analogy where he sort of says to his Russian interrogators, this is your Vietnam. What you're doing to these people, we did to them. But they accept no responsibility.
No, right, exactly.
And for some reason, that means the Mujahideen are honorable, but the Vietnamese still aren't. I mean, it doesn't.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't add up. So it's weird that you would even pick that analogy. Because you're not willing to do
I was really struck by that on this viewing, where I said, wait, so Troutman's acknowledging that what they're doing is like what we did, but yet we're still righteous and they're evil.
But this is the thing that's sort of, in wrapping it all up in, their kind of get out is basically, but the Russians were working with the Viet Cong, so whoever works with the Russians is the enemy. Like, even if you're Afghanistani and you're supplying information to the Russians, you're the enemy.
Right.
If you're a Russian who decides not to support the Russians and sell out your people, like Yuri, you're suddenly a good guy. So it's very clear where the morality line is. It's like you're either on one side of the Cold War or you're not.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say.
But this is very late for that kind of thinking. I mean, detente and de-escalation of the Cold War this is 88. The Berlin Wall's about to fall.
Yeah.
It's very, and this is where the comparison to Living Daylights is actually quite good, because the Living Daylights doesn't go so far as to say the Russian state isn't isn't going through a process of detente and de-escalation. It's always just rogue agents within the Russian military who are screwing everything up. But here, it's very clearly saying, by this point, Reagan's already renounced his evil empire statement, visited Russia, St. Petersburg, stood in St. Peter's Square and said, I was wrong when I said you were an evil empire.
Right.
And so somehow Rambo hasn't got the memo yet that the Cold War is pretty much over.
Nothing's filtered down to the temple where he's working with the monks.
So
by
that's
the way where this movie starts.
Yeah. Well,
first you have the stick fight.
I love this scene.
Yeah, I do too.
I love this scene.
But is it not astonishing to watch this scene through the goggles of COVID? Because it's just rafters of people stacked on
now
top
I
of each
will
other.
forever.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not sharing gloves, guys. Okay.
Well, and this movie also kind of boldly declares exactly what this movie's going to be, because Rambo has his shirt off minute fucking one.
Well,
it starts with shirt off.
As you alluded to at the end of the last episode, this begins with Stallone turning, looking directly into the camera,
right,
walking into the camera and walking past it as if he was a 3D effect. This is Rambo 3D in all but 3D.
Oh, man.
And then we have a fight scene that, as you alluded to with the COVID statement, more extras than we've ever seen in the previous two movies.
Right.
And we'll probably ever see again.
Yeah.
All spectacle. It feels like a fantasy scene from Conan the Barbarian. I've already made the comparison. And just the idea that it's all performative, it's all spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, his shirt's off immediately. They're fighting with nunchucks. It's like there's no...
Sticks. Stick fighting.
There's no pretense that this is anything other than action entertainment.
No, yeah.
And I think that's what the scene functioned... As well as, again...
Yeah, you could say it shows a little bit, the tiniest bit of character development, because his earnings he just gives to the monks right away when he gets on.
Yeah, I noted that too, that I thought maybe that was walking back some of the racism towards, anyone who's not American.
Yeah.
I was that seemed to me to be a nod that but it's problematic for the next movie because he's very zen at the beginning of this movie. Like,
yeah,
the other function that the fight serves to show that weirdly, even though that this is a very extreme piece of combat, he's able to he spares his opponent.
You basically have the end of the second movie.
Yeah. Well, he's got no
at the beginning of this movie.
And it's Rambo 3, it's not personal. This guy's just his opponent. He's like, "Okay, fight's over. Let's stop. You fought a good fight. Here's the money."
But that's the weird thing about this movie, is that you have this moment where the homicidal maniac is about to take over, and he has to glare at this person for a moment before he gets his senses. Then that's followed immediately by Troutman coming to see him and say, "Come full circle. You're just a killing machine. That's what we need you to be. That's who you are. Accept it."
I don't think there's any recognizable school of therapy that would condone what Troutman is advocating.
Right.
which is that he's basically saying, you're very, you're in a very zen place at the moment. But it's bullshit.
But it's all nonsense.
It's going to fall away, and you're going to go back to killing people and blowing shit up.
So
why don't you do it? Why don't you do it with me in a way that would help the government, basically?
Well, and just to end this segment, let me just say that this movie proposes that the U.S.'s best chance is to send their most handsome senior citizen by himself into Afghanistan. So let's just let everybody chew on that during a commercial break, and then we'll come back and explain it when we come back. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
That was a different time. I like to think I know something about beer. But nowadays, even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day, you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need. The Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They'll try new beers. They'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back. Tom and I are here, of course, talking about the 1988 sequel, Rambo Iii. When we left, Tom, we were at the part of the story where Troutman tries to convince Rambo that he's nothing but a mindless killing machine and that he should just accept it.
Yep.
I guess it ends up being proven true because this movie set a Guinness record as the most violent movie.
Wow.
With
wait. Have these people seen Cannibal Holocaust or anything? Like, what was the criteria here?
Acts of violence.
Okay.
So I guess...
Yeah. All right.
It's not just dead bodies. But at any rate, it did set a Guinness World Record. And now this is where I draw a delineation between this movie and Rambo IV. Because Rambo is almost essentially in both movies, he's in the same place.
Completely.
He's found a place for himself. Right?
Yeah, he's just happier about it in this movie.
Yeah, and he's a happier person. You know, either banging on tin at the temple with the monks in this movie and catching cobras and pythons in the next movie.
Which, let's face it, looks a lot less fun.
Right. But at any rate, he seems to have found a place in the world where he is comfortable. And in both movies, somebody comes and says, "Do this with me," and he says no.
Right.
Now, because of his relationship to Troutman, this movie is more successful for me in him deciding to do what he does.
Well, the decision's taken out of his hands. Because Troutman gets kidnapped.
He still can make the choice, though, Tom.
Yeah, but I don't see it.
We as an audience have a personal history with the character too, so we can't conceive of him making that choice, and that's why it works better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, all Troutman does is get him into dangerous situations. So,
know. By the way, Troutman, a senior, he's like 62 in this movie. So the U.S. military sends a 62-year-old man into Afghanistan with apparently one clip on his machine gun. Did you notice when he gets kidnapped? He's shooting he shoots out one clip, pulls it out, and just goes, "God damn it!" Like, well, I'm done for.
And that even just that scene of him getting kidnapped feels like a reshoot or an afterthought, because we just go to Afghanistan without any establishing shot, any idea that we're there. We figure it out when...
I suppose we have that he said, "I'm going." So when you see him in his army garb in a Jeep...
Maybe it is just a little bit of filmmaking naivety, something that a more established director would have...
Right.
I don't know. But it's a very strange scene. We're going back to talking about how history has not served this movie well, but...
Right.
We will continue in American movies to hear the sound of explosions, gunfire, and the words "Allahu Akbar," but in a very different context.
Right.
Not where they're the victim.
And then, of course, he's kidnapped by the Russians, and I love that they kidnap him. We kind of referenced his big speech about Vietnam, and this is your Vietnam. Yeah. Did you notice that the Russian villain has, like, pictures of his family on the mirror?
Yeah, and you're kind of laughing at that. I kind of quite liked it.
Really?
I mean, he's established in a very cartoonish way.
Well, that was why it made me laugh,
with
because
the chess and the cigarettes.
He's purported to be a cartoonish villain who's a family man.
But then the last movie did the same kind of thing. You know, we talked about how, like, Murdoch is not acting like he's not a villain. He's just doing his job, and I think they're trying to make the same point here. He looks at his family at exactly the moment he says, "You've been abandoned by your government." So we're supposed to at least say that, you know, everyone who's in Afghanistan after 9 years of bloodbath is a victim at this point.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't follow up on that, and
right.
he becomes this crazy, screaming, smoking, chess-playing villain again.
Uh-huh.
But I do like that they take it down a notch just for that moment. You know, jumping forward to the last line of the movie, you know, they say, we've gotten soft.
I know.
I think also the filmmaking has got soft. They're more concerned with families and kids and women and the suffering. You know, I mean, not in a way that saves any of those people, but
right,
certainly
exactly.
Philosophically, they're thinking in more sentimental.
They're on the mind of the filmmakers,
right? And you know, there's time.
And you alluded to this in the previous episode because we talked about the character Ko and introducing this sort of female protagonist and love interest, which humanized the character of Rambo in a way we've never had since, before or since. Even Colonel Troutman, his connection with Troutman doesn't really reach the level that you found with Ko. And
I disagree. I think this movie is a love story between those two men.
Well, but I would argue that I think it's more successful because it's just because
it's the heart of this movie.
It's played for such comedy. No, I meant that I think it's more successful in the first movie with Ko.
Oh no, I love the fact that it devolves into a buddy comedy, not just because it's funny and they do it well. I think there's something genuinely quite touching about their relationship. But
all right,
that's just me.
But what I was going to say was, I think you alluded to, but you said you were going to save it, and I assume you're talking about the child.
Yeah.
In this movie.
Very strategic move.
Right.
In a sequel to sort of try to humanize the hero, not necessarily the hero, but the lead of the movie, by adding a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Terminator 2.
Temple of Doom.
Which incidentally came up as the next movie when I was watching this on Hulu. It's like, next up, Terminator 2. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this Hulu doesn't even want me to watch Rambo. Like, they would rather I watch Terminator, because they're all on there. They're
right.
like, if you're watching Rambo 3, you probably don't want to watch Rambo. You probably want to watch something fun like Terminator 2. And
right,
Ghostbusters.
Exactly.
Your example's great as well. But yeah, Ghostbusters 2, you know, making Peter Venkman more sympathetic. So it's a strategic thing that movies of this era do to.
It's an impasse.
As the star image of the actors changes, you know, Schwarzenegger when he did the first Terminator is a villain, and you know he's just muscle. By the time he does Terminator 2, he's a star, so they have to account for that. They put the kid in, make him a sympathetic presence. And it's kind of the same thing here. I didn't mind it. I mean,
I didn't either. I thought it was handled really well. It's one of those things that can go
in the leg.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a kind of nod to, like, it's sort of like, yes, we're going to have a kid in this torture-based war movie, but he's not going to be spared all the violence.
Right. But that's the other thing about this movie, because this is I feel very strange saying this, but this is the first time in which there are things happening to people's bodies that are inherently dishonest.
Why do you feel strange saying that?
Well, because I think you could say that about any of these movies.
But like, why? Yeah, why is that on you to point that out?
No, yeah, I know. But because it feels like I'm sticking up for Rambo First Blood Part 2 in a way I'm not willing to do with this movie. But this movie is far more egregious in what happens to the characters that is dishonest. If you get shot by a helicopter's cannon, you're done. Something that the next movie will show us plainly.
And I don't know
with the 50 caliber machine gun, but
well, I don't know what the tank that Rambo's in could possibly be made of.
Yeah.
That would protect him would allow him to survive being attacked by a helicopter.
Right.
Or a fighter jet, I suppose. You're absolutely right, and I think overall it is kind of sanitized compared to certainly First Blood, but also a little bit of Part 2 as well.
Part 2, yeah.
I was particularly struck by how long Zaysen, the Russian general, doesn't torture Troutman.
Yeah, right.
Until Rambo arrives, with no motivation. He doesn't even know Rambo's coming.
Right.
So you can't even claim that...
Something that's even more egregious in the next movie.
Right. Oh, yeah. But then, I will get there, but I also think, like, one of Last Blood's problems is that it refuses to sanitize what's happening. So, yeah, it just, it's like we know that we're going to spare you, conveniently spare you atrocities that would have absolutely happened, not necessarily in the real world, but even in the kind of fictional world. Doesn't make sense as to why Troutman wouldn't have been tortured by this point.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, it's definitely dishonest, but I think this is the kind of movie that is...
I mean, the worst thing that happens to him is he's strung up by his wrists on a rope, and there, it's... I kind of wanted him to go, oh, man, did you just fix my back? Thank you.
Well, he more or less does. I know. When they say, where is the, where's Rambo or whatever, and he's like, it's close, he's up your ass. I mean, this movie's sassy. Everyone in this movie is sassy.
So sassy, this movie.
Rambo has become this sardonic, dry, pithy wit, which has never been in play before.
Never.
And never really will be again.
I'm really sorry I got you into this, John. No, you're not.
Yeah.
And then he scampers off to go kill some people.
And when the interplay's that good, and it's those two actors doing it, you don't mind. And you get it, very early on, you get a hint that there's something different here. About the repartee.
Good timing. What are friends for?
Well, no, early on, I think the point at which I realized that this was going to be largely a comedy was the discussion of the blue light.
Yeah, right.
And by the way, I've forgotten the name of the character, his ally in the Mujahideen.
Uh-huh.
Great performance. Great character. I mean, these are it reminded me of...
Oh, no, that's a different guy.
It reminded me of Die Hard 2, Die Harder, where, like, there's too many characters in this. They're all ridiculous, but they're so well played.
But they're
and
all
well
so
written.
good. Right.
You don't mind. And this was another one where I thought exactly the same. But anyway, they discussed, they're going through Rambo's equipment, and he says, this is a blue, like, he asked, what's this? A blue light. They said, what does it do? It turns blue.
It turns blue.
I mean, I thought two things. I thought, wow, they're really laying the banter on thick here.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely they will lean into that for the rest of the movie. But also I was thinking that, again, it's like Rambo wanting to branch out a little bit into other Stallone franchises almost. Because that could have been a Rocky Balboa line.
Yeah.
That's not really a Rambo line. That's a Rocky Balboa line.
And they, they have all kind. I think the character is Nassim.
Yes. And the movie, and let's not forget, this movie begins with a fight, like a staged fight. Clearly, they're thinking about Stallone's. It makes me think of that wonderful Simpsons gag where Nelson is dressed as a cowboy, like a marshal of an old town, and when he says, "And I'm Kevin Costner in one of his Western roles."
Yeah.
And I thought the same here, like when he might as well have introduced himself as, "Hi, I'm Sylvester Stallone in one of my action roles."
Right. But Nassim has this great moment where even before I think the blue light, where he says, "I am looking at you and I think you have no experience with fighting or war. Come on, tell me, am I right? I'm right, aren't I?"
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's great.
But also, I mean, let's again, I think that, the movie is being quite overt about that. Like the way we've come to know him as this kind of like almost a kind of ninja.
Yeah.
In that, he can camouflage himself, he can blend in,
he
disappear,
can become mud.
Like, a proto Leon from The Professional.
Yeah, right.
In this movie, like his strategy is entirely the opposite. It's about being as conspicuous as possible. When he arrives at the market, the tallest person there with black 80s hair, dressed like an American backpacker. When they say you look like a tourist,
like
you look like a tourist.
Star.
It's like you do.
Yeah.
And I just sort of think like, is that part of his cover that he's pretending to be a tourist?
I had that same thought where I was like, wow, there's just no attempt to try to conceal yourself.
I even said, to
foreigner.
the movie out loud, "Rambo, you're gonna get caught."
You're right.
Have you learned nothing? And then, like Nassim, he says, "I think you're a tourist," but he almost reacts as if Rambo says, "I'm no tourist," and then Nassim reacts as if that's a code word, like the soft shell crabs in View to a Kill. It's like the dynamic changes, and it's like, "Oh, you're the kind of secret the secret operator." So very confusing.
I'd like us to have enough listeners so that they can start betting on themselves at what minute you'll mention a James Bond movie.
But the scene... Hey, don't you talk to me about Bond movie comparisons. Not only... He is full Bond in this movie. The one-liners... At one point, he fights with a Jaws-like nemesis.
Yeah.
On a cliff. He's gone full Bond here.
I can't disagree.
But I think that's intentional the entire way. And that's why I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I don't even... And this is really... Talk about dishonesty. This is me being dishonest. Remember when we were doing the Die Hards and I raised the question, I think it was a good day to die hard? No, not a good day to die hard. Live Free or Die Hard. Mm-hmm. I asked, is this still John McClane or is it just Bruce Willis?
Human Walnut or whatever you...
Yeah, that's right, Human Walnut. I should be asking the same question here because this is not First Blood John Rambo. By any stretch of the imagination.
No.
In any shape or form.
But we've spoken
I don't
to that...
care. But I also don't think it's just Stallone. It's some weird hybrid.
No, it's a hybrid.
Of all the Stallone roles in one
Because to your point, this is not the third sequel in the series. This is the second sequel in the series of Rambo movies.
Right.
First Blood almost has no place with the rest of these movies.
Right.
Yeah.
And you need to watch them like that, which is why watching them like we do might, for once...
Might help.
For one time in the entirety of cinema might actually be the way to do it.
All right, let's take another break, and then we'll come back, and we will finish up Rambo III. It's very weird to not even be able to say Part 3. It's just Rambo 3. Very good, then. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back. Tom and I are here discussing the 1988 film Rambo Iii. Listen. I want to talk about... I think the thing I want to talk about right now are the stunts in this movie. Did you notice stunts in this movie?
Yes. What do you mean?
Well, specifically,
You've seen
two
this movie,
moments.
Right?
Yeah, two. Because one of the reasons I like this movie as much as I did on this viewing are the stunts. And I did not know that Sylvester Stallone apparently grew up his whole life riding horses, because that doesn't seem like a natural fit. But he did, I learned, and he was playing polo by age 11. Mm-hmm. And when they're playing
Secret smart guy.
Secret smart guy.
Thank you, Jessica.
Exactly. And when he is playing the disemboweled goat game, there is a stunt in that sequence that mesmerizes me. I could like this movie just for that stunt, where he is leaning off to the side of his horse and picks up in slow motion the dead goat. It's incredible.
Yeah. There's so much to say about the disemboweled goat game. For me, what really stood out, first of all...
But the stunt isn't what stood out for you?
It did. I've got a lot to say about the slow motion rendering of it, but you knew that was coming.
Right.
First of all, it really strikes me the first two movies are all business, right? Mm-hmm. In this movie, he has time for sports, to participate...
Right. For sports with local villagers.
Sports, to hang out with a local kid. It just strikes me that this is an entirely different scenario, environment that we thrust Rambo into. Then, of course, the stunt, which is incredible, rendered in slow motion, which, as I always say, is never necessary. I also don't think it's necessary to show that he's mastered and won Afghani Quidditch. So that's,
goat Quidditch.
It made me think. A lot of this movie made me think of Rocky IV, mainly because it's it's doing the same thing of like putting your hero in a foreign context, in an enemy war zone.
It's so funny you say that, because I had thoughts of that as I was watching it this time.
And then the way that he proves himself to the country is through these feats of strength. Like in here it's the disembodied goat game, disemboweled goat game, and in Rocky IV it's climbing a mountain. Oh, he climbs a mountain. Actually, he climbs a mountain here too.
Yeah.
I have the note. Captain Rambo is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain? To quote behind the scenes Shatner, Star Trek V. And I think it is all about that. It's like the only way that you're gonna ideologically convince people that American exceptionalism should be global is by going to their country and showing how strong you are physically.
But that's the thing too, because he's showing. So you're right on that level where the American exceptionalism is sort of checked off in the box. Okay, because he can play the goat game, but that is immediately followed by a helicopter attack, which is their fault.
Yes.
So, men, women, and children all die because they brought, by accident, but that there was.
They were sleeping on. Basically, they were sleeping on the job.
There was a spy. There was a spy at the gun pickup. Who went and sold
and not
sold
the
them
most
out.
suspicious Russian in the world, but in fact just some guy, some guy from the village.
Yeah, some guy.
Well, two things. The first that is.
But he's also treated as a hero for shooting down one of the choppers, and
right, which arguably
guy,
is his fault
Omar,
because everyone took their eye off the ball.
Or Masood,
watching him play.
His name, the actor's Spiros Focus. He's from Jewel of the Nile, which we'll have to do at some point, but
hopefully very soon.
Yeah, so he's Omar from Jewel of the Nile, and he's he like flat out says you're a good man.
Yeah, I mean, what's
thanks for being responsible for killing our women and children.
This
May
makes
God
me
be
think
with
of
you.
Like how I appreciate how this movie's trying to be different. It like, but also calls back to the previous movies. So I like the fact that they're taking the time to have fun, but they show that basically that fun makes you vulnerable. You take your eye off the ball,
and the other big
all hell
thing
breaks loose. And it's
right.
But it's kind of like, I wrote the note that, of course, because this is a Rambo movie, no one can have consecutive fun without death around the corner. And this is what happens.
Exactly. These movies are always concerned with showing the cost of war.
Well, the cost of, like, acting like a normal human being in a war zone. Because Ko dies... Well, not directly because they kiss, but the implication is that as soon as he lets his guard down.
No, yeah, but right, it's the exact moment that he says, "Yes, you can come with me. We're going to be together forever."
He makes himself vulnerable and he gets punished for it, and this happens again and again in all these movies. Right. So, but like you say here, it's not really. It's sort of like it's there in the movie as a trope, but while you definitely feel that with Ko's death, here you don't feel like he was doing anything wrong when the evidence is to the contrary. He's supposed to be protecting them,
right.
And he's dragging a goat around the desert for fun. So I think that's interesting. It's interesting. Like this movie is very different tonally, but it's doing a lot of the same things. The formula is set now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a question because this movie very much does not take place in a jungle, and we're in a desert, which made me constantly ask, does Rambo ever get dehydrated?
Well, we learn is it...
Never eaten, never drinking.
Remind me, it's been a little while since I saw First Blood. Do we establish in the first movie that he's of Indian-German descent, or only in part 2? Right. I felt that, but I wanted to check. Which is basically sort of... It's a movie shorthand way of saying he's good in the woods. Because he's got the Indian and he's got the German, both very woody people.
It's a racist way of saying,
they're both very forest-driven cultures, shall we say?
They're forest people, aren't they? You'll be fine. Because Murdoch in the second movie even says, "What a combination!"
Well, And you know, this goes to the previous point of these, you know, both Troutman and Rambo sticking out like a sore thumb. Because Rambo has to go out round shirtless everywhere. Otherwise, as you say, he would die of dehydration. So it's this slightly paunchy, albeit, you know, devilishly handsome 62-year-old man sweating his arse off next to a shirtless Conan the Barbarian looking man, both of them white, in the middle of the Afghani desert, just wandering around. And then they look surprised when the Russians catch up with them. But
always.
You know, I get the feeling that
the number of times that Rambo takes over a vehicle or a chopper and that vehicle or chopper immediately gets shot down is astonishing between these first two sequels. But I have a note here because for the Saving the Troutman scene, Saving Private Troutman, as ridiculous as it is, it's shot well it's shot in a way where I believed it, where I thought this could happen. One man
that
could
scene
sneak
is well
in there.
shot. If that's what it made you think. The first rescue attempt, I think, is
that's the one I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, he doesn't get him out.
No.
So that's why it's believable.
But the getting in part.
Oh, okay. Well, and also, you know, is this the first part of the first rescue attempt or the second rescue attempt? But very suspenseful. Like
and that's the other part.
Yeah.
And it's the first attempt. Because it's a big sequence. It's like 15 minutes.
Yeah. Because if you think about, you know, relative to part 2, Rambo's straight in there, bow and arrows in the head, beheading people. And this is like, plant the bomb, go over here, plant the bomb, get under this, go into that. Walk
behind these people.
I was darkly amused.
Turn a corner, they're coming out. Oop, dodge, go back.
Yeah, I was darkly amused by how he goes to the 2 Afghani women in a cage.
Right.
And goes, American, American. It's like, boy, there's U.S. colonialism.
Right.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Yeah.
But it's like, there are women in cages, and you just want to get the middle-aged guy who is there by his own volition.
We do have at least the establishing shot of him saving them later.
Well, this is it.
They were on his mind.
They don't play to this in the movies because it's morally abhorrent, but he makes choices.
Yeah.
He selects who will live and who will die.
Right.
He did it with the POWs in the last movie. He definitely does it in the next movie.
Oh, yeah.
But this one is a similar thing where it's kind of like he's like, I've got to get one prisoner out, the white guy, obviously.
Which I fail at.
Yeah, which I fail at the first time. And I'll take a couple of stragglers with me to show that, you know, that I've at least thought about saving some of the people who are in the prison who are innocent of anything. And are actually the victims of this. It's like, just bring a couple of stragglers and it looks better. Yeah.
But he's able to eventually get them out. There's a lot of underground tunnel stuff and underground caves. I like the cave stuff.
Well, that comes back big.
That's all silly and fun.
Yeah, and Last Blood is set pretty much entirely in a cave.
Yes.
So, this...
Not as much fun, though. You don't have the blue lights. You don't have...
This is not specific... No, it's not.
You don't have the quips between him and Richard Crenna. How do you feel? Well done.
Oh, well, that's a Bond line right there.
That's great.
I want to kind of marvel at... I mean, the tunnels just made me think of it. Stallone's ability to pocket something and bring it back later on in a franchise, or even begin a new franchise with it. And we didn't talk about this in First Blood Part 2. But did you notice him saying in that movie, "I'm expendable"? And then following up, "You're not expendable." Yeah. Stallone is such a good businessman, he's already plugging a movie that he will make 2 decades later.
Yeah, right.
And I feel the same here. He's like, yeah, tunnels, that's a good idea. Yeah, maybe I'll make a Rambo movie that's just set in a tunnel. While we're talking about we're talking about algorithms, and on my IMDb page, when you go to the Rambo sequels, they give you options of other things to look up. The first one is Big Mouth. It's just a straight line from the Rambo of First Blood Part 2 into the
Sylvester Stallone porno of Big Mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I like, you have a very, I'll give this to you, Tom, very James Bond fight with that big villain on top of the mountain.
Which is how you know it's kind of deliberate. It's not an accident. He's not accidentally becoming James Bond. It's like we give him all the Bond thing. The Bond. We surround him with the Bond elements as well. And then the kickboxing that he exhibits while he's stick fighting comes back so he can kill a man 3 ways.
Right.
He kicks him off a cliff. Lets a grenade go off, and then pushes him off a cliff. It's like one of those things
hangs
is fine.
him.
Yeah, it's like one of those things is fine.
Right. One is enough.
I wonder if they're even thinking like, this is Rambo 3. Everyone has to die 3 ways.
Yeah.
Like,
well, this movie has
like Jaws 3D, but with deaths.
There you go. And we haven't even mentioned the big gore porn body horror of this movie, where he gets injured.
Oh, he pulls the arrow out of himself.
I think just
what is it, like
just a piece of wood.
Metal?
Yeah, I think it's wood. And so he breaks it off. Then he escapes. Then he asks for a bullet. And then he pushes in his body from behind and pushes the wood out, grabs it, and takes the top of the bullet off, puts gunpowder in the back of his wound, and then lights it so it goes through. I remember what a big deal that scene was when the movie came out. They were like, "You're not going to believe this."
It's like a scene from like a Hammer horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have the gore and the fire, you're in that territory.
But followed almost not immediately, but followed by, buddy comedy duo.
Yes.
You taught us to ignore pain, didn't you? How's it working? Not great.
No. And then, can you fly that thing? Let's find out.
To immediately get shot down.
But that scene is also fascinating in terms of, that. Again, they're kind of like they're pulling back a little bit on the development of Rambo as a rounded person, because the kid is injured.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to get the kid and the Nassim to safety, and he's like, "No, you go. I've got to stay." And all the time, he's not telling them that he's dying from a wound.
Right.
Only after they go does he exhibit pain.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's both saying that he cares enough to spare them that, but he's, into super repression mode. So it's actually a nice dynamic to think of Rambo that way. Like
now, so we're basically at the end. Do you buy he and Troutman saying, "Fuck it," and 2 men taking on an army? Wouldn't these 2 characters bide their time and just go ahead and be tortured and find a way to escape later?
Define by. If you're asking whether,
I'm asking, do you buy it beyond they needed to end the movie?
If you're asking if they,
because that's the only justification was we're at the end of the movie.
I buy it because they're selling it.
Okay, fine.
But I'm also buying it because
it's also, I mean, it does work on the level of great joke.
It's very self-referential. It's probably the most self-referential moment in the entire franchise, where, you know, that their escape is impossible. They're two white men in the desert surrounded by the Russian army.
Uh-huh.
And they just look at each other and it's like, we don't even have a writing fix for this.
Yeah.
So I love it on that level. But of course it's ludicrous and implausible. But, you know, I suppose the very end of the movie...
I think it's kind of the magic of the movie, though, isn't it?
I agree.
It totally fits the tone of the whole rest of this movie. So that's why it doesn't make me mad.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make me mad at all. And I think the payoff is at the very end of the movie, when Troutman says we're getting soft.
Yeah.
Because that tells me that there's a through line here of like these guys being past their best and they're starting to loosen up. Right. And it's also where that line, hell of a time for humor, John, makes sense. Like,
right.
You know, the idea that it's age and experience is kind of weakening them to the point where they can't be so angsty and cynical about everything.
Right.
I mean, that's a ludicrous proposition because, as we know, Rambo is suffering from PTSD.
Right.
And by all rights, Troutman should be too.
This poor guy. Right.
By all rights, Troutman should be too. Also, I just want to bring up, what I'm not buying is that Troutman was ever in combat.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's getting old, and I think that's the point they're trying to make. But he stops and goes, "We need to take a rest. We've got to take a rest." And then he says, like, when they're halfway escaped, "We did it, John."
Right.
I'm like, it's like this guy is set up to be like the guy who
Were you in charge of other people?
This guy who taught Rambo everything he knew. And he thinks it's over when they just got out of the prison and are exposed, you know, are literally in the middle of the desert. Anyone can see them.
There's a long way to go, Troutman.
So I kind of think it all pays off with that final line, which I think is beautifully delivered and a really nice moment. Then we go into the credits of, you know, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. And we remember this is not
he ain't heavy, ellipses, he's my brother.
And you realize at this moment I'm like, yeah, actually this you know, for all its propaganda purposes, what this movie is about and what makes it good and rewatchable is that it's just like it's a non-sexual love story between two men.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm gonna rescue him and get him out.
By the way, that song is sung by Bill Medley.
Bill Medley!
Medley. With the lyrics, "It's a long, 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 long road." I laughed out loud when I heard how many longs were in Long Road. I was like, it's a long road to the end of this fucking song.
I also thought that Bill Medley might not be a person and might actually be a software program. Like, let's put the song into Bill Medley and see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
But I want to talk about the credits.
Well, just before that, just really quickly, I want to say, I remember what I hated most about this movie on a first viewing was watching a chopper's cannon shoot Troutman in the shoulder and shoot Rambo in the leg. And they just, at the end of the movie, wrap it with white bandages and drive away. And we'll see in the next movie the kind of damage that kind of weapon can actually do to the human body, because Sylvester Stallone is intent on us knowing what it can do to the body.
Right. He's making a very different kind of propaganda movie.
Yeah, and it was what I was referencing earlier about the dishonest part of this movie. But again, on this viewing, I totally got it. I was like, this is what this movie is. This movie actually does what things that parody this movie would do.
Yeah, it's McBain.
It's McBain. And so on that level, I have no choice but to appreciate it. Anyway. Yeah,
I think by that point, it's A-team enough that they don't even really need the bandages. They could just get up and dust themselves off.
Exactly.
And we buy it.
And we're done. But all right, to the credits.
Credits. Okay. Oh, how long have you got? We've talked about day for night, sand for snow.
Right.
How about Arizona for Afghanistan?
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Which they make sense of by having Rambo being from Arizona, which they saddle themselves with that now, and they're stuck with it for the next two movies. Okay. First of all, the credit that begins, weapons furnished by. I have never seen that credit before or since in a movie.
Well, you see it in the...
Weapons furnished by Israel.
Right. Because some of this movie was shot in Israel, too. Tel Aviv.
The irony...
Yes. Yeah.
This movie, this is pure adulation of Muslim people and culture, and the arms, in order to stage that movie, were provided by Israel. Helicopters have their own section of the credits.
Go on.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Again, I've never seen a helicopter... Like, I've never seen a set of credits broken up with a section just for helicopters before this movie.
Well, in regards to the weapons, it's this series of movies because all the movies give credit to the knife maker. And so in previous movies, I've seen credit to the knife maker, but to your point, we have credit not just to the knife maker, but then to the people who furnished the weapons.
Right. Got it. Yeah, half the American government credited the movie. We talked about that. Clearly, this is a propaganda movie.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, ending by, which we've talked about already, but the what? Giving
dedication.
credit to the dedication to the brave men and women.
Yeah. That's all I had, but that's all astonishing. That's all astonishing to me.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's just...
Anything else before we go?
Well, I mean, here's just a question, just to because you've alluded to this series being in two very distinct parts, and this is the end of the first.
This is the end of the first part, right?
Do you feel like they were ending the series here?
Ooh.
Because I'm in two minds. Yeah.
I'd never given it a conscious thought, but it does not feel like a full circle.
Well, at the beginning of the movie was a full circle, but according to Troutman, that's the problem.
You're right, exactly.
He says, Rambo says, I've gone full circle, and Troutman's like, no, that's a bad thing.
No, you're a killer. Come on.
It's like, what, that he's happy and well-adjusted is a bad thing?
But that's another theme for all of these movies. A man who's tried to found a niche for him to live in which he can survive basically the peril of his own terrible thoughts, and then is brought out of retirement to go waist deep into things that are going to re-break his mind.
I mean, I think there's mixed messages here because the kid says, will you come back and join us? And he says, maybe next time. I mean, U.S. history got in the way there, so he can't rejoin the Taliban.
Yeah, exactly. I've got one last thing I'll tell you about this movie from the director Peter MacDonald. Quote I have, which is, he feels the bad box office was because Russians withdrew from Afghanistan before the movie was released, but then takes credit and says he's happy that the movie may have helped contribute to their withdrawal.
Yeah, there's nothing like saying that you're the
credit
most...
where credit is not due.
Yeah, well, there's a way to shame people, and it's not by saying that you're the scum of the earth. So they say maybe next time, which translates as let's leave the door open for a sequel. Then they say, Troutman says we're getting soft, and that to me is a clear indication of like we're too old for this shit, basically. But and interestingly, I read that prior to baking both Rocky Balboa and Rambo, Stallone publicly said, "I'm too old to play either of these characters anymore," and so it's kind of like. Yeah, it's like it feels like the end of the series, but as we've said, he just can't leave things
well enough alone. Yeah,
and but I'll be again like you're gonna tell me in the next episode, but I'm interested from this point onward. What's the impetus to come back? How much is it to reestablish, to give Rambo and the Rambo franchise an ending the way that Rocky Balboa gives the Rocky series an ending? Or how much is it like stuff's going on in Burma that people need to know about?
Yeah.
If we tack on a Rambo, we can probably get it made. Harvey Weinstein will probably go for it.
Nice last punch. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have something to get off your chest about Rambo 3, something we missed, please let us know.
Your greased chest.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Please rate and review us. Say goodbye, Tom.
Maybe next time.
Very good, then. For Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions, I'm Michael Schatz of the How Dare You Awards. We'll see you next time for Rambo. Period. Done. End of the story. No 4.